Hello, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us again for our second workshop with Professor Wagner. Hope you guys had a great time on the first one. And if you still haven't submit your previous assignment, you can always email it to me. I will type in my email address to the chat. Welcome back, and all yours, Professor.
Hey, everybody. Good evening. It's early morning here. I hope you're doing well. It's nice to see all of you again. So I received a bunch of submissions. I've seen beat sheets and log lines from many of you, and they were very interesting. And I was glad to see that so many people chose to participate. I am providing commentary to everyone who sent something in for this workshop. In the workshop, I'm going to try to save the last 20 minutes or maybe even half an hour of our time together today to actually go over 6 or 7 of them live to the whole class, because I think there's valuable insights that you could get from hearing the critique of somebody else's piece. But I will also provide my feedback to Emily so that she can email you back the comments that I made on the work that you turned in. So let me share my screen. But before we get to that, we're going to talk a little bit more in a more general way. All right. So going back to this slide, everybody can see this, right? Yeah. Okay. Going back to this slide of what we tend to focus on in your first year at Scad, which is really Film 100. That's the film class that you would take as an undergraduate. Now, there may be some potential MFA students on this call as well, but speaking to the undergrads, you take one film class in your first year, and that's Film 100. And it's a very intensive class. It's very hands-on. You start working with the cameras right away. And these are, again, the topics that we try to cover, at least give an introduction to in that first 10-week class. The one we're going to talk about in this second workshop is shot design and coverage. Last time we talked about storytelling and got you moving toward writing a script, which is, of course, the foundation of any movie. Documentary is a little different, but any narrative movie starts with the script. So we talked about a little bit about the structure of a script last time, not the format. That would take a whole other class to do. We're not going to touch on that. We're skipping over cameras and lenses because can't really do that very well on Zoom. And we're going to shot design and coverage. So once there is a script, now you have to figure out how to turn that from pages into frames of image. So the structure of any narrative movie is hierarchical, meaning that components go together into larger components, which go together into the complete film. And so this is how I like to break it down, that the fundamental particle, the molecule, as it were, that builds every film is the shot. That may seem really obvious, but it may also be something that you have not really thought about before. Shots assemble together into scenes. And what defines a scene is a piece of action that takes place in a coherent single stretch of time and a single location. Scenes then get assembled together into a sequence. Sequences get assembled together into an act, and sequence and act, and I'm going to come back to these and talk more about each of them. So I'm just kind of giving you an overview right now. But a sequence and an act is more of a storytelling structure. A shot is filmic. A shot is a very specific, concrete thing that has to do with the image that you've captured. A scene has to do with the time and space of the storytelling. But a sequence and an act goes back to the script. It goes back to the storytelling. And it can be a little hard to figure out, well, is this a sequence? Where does my sequence end? Where does my act end? Sometimes you can write a script, even make a movie, and not be really sure where your acts are. And different people have different views of where the act breaks are in a movie. You may have heard, if you've studied drama or film storytelling at all, that there's a 3-act structure, roughly the beginning of the movie when the problem gets set up, the middle of the movie when the actor tries to, or where the character tries to do things to solve the problem, and the climax of the movie. So you could say there's always a 3-act structure, but if you look at a movie like Raiders of the Lost Ark, I hope everybody's seen the original Raiders of the Lost Ark, wonderful movie. If you really broke that down, you would probably say that it has 7 acts, not 3. So acts are a little complicated. In a short film, especially a 1 to 2 minute film, I think we'd always be looking to break it down into 3 acts, which is setup, rising action, and climax. You put all those acts together and you get a movie. Okay, so to go into a little more detail, a shot, a series of uninterrupted frames of action. As I'm sure you know, when you shoot a movie, it's a series of still frames. It's usually 24 frames to make a single second of time. The camera is taking those pictures very rapidly, playing them back at the same speed they were taken, and it creates the illusion of movement when in fact each of those frames is static. As long as the camera is running and hasn't cut and the shot is continuous, it's a shot. A scene is an assemblage of those shots in a single location, uninterrupted period of time. So our unit of measure there, or our frame of reference, is time. The sequence and the act, the frame of reference, is story. All right. So the word shot, you hear it all the time, constantly, when you're studying film, when you're making a movie. We talk about shots all the time. In a literal way, we mean what I just said, a series of frames capturing an uninterrupted period of time. But we also mean something else. And this is probably how we use it more often. It is also a specific camera angle, a frame, and the camera movement that's used to capture that action. So if somebody says to you, what shot are you doing? What shot do you want to be on? What's the next shot that we have to film today? Yes, they mean a series of frames capturing a period of time, but what they really mean is, where is the camera? What lens is on the camera? How wide is our view? Is the camera moving? What's in the frame? All of that adds up to your shot. So when we describe a shot, there's 3 attributes that go into describing that shot. It's the size of the shot, it's the purpose of the shot, and it's the movement in the shot. Now, obviously, there's much, much more to it in terms of everything that's in front of the camera, but the actors, the set, the props, all of it. But when we describe the camera's role, it's size, purpose, and movement. Okay, so let's talk about size first. Size is always defined with a specific nomenclature, a specific name for what everybody who makes films roughly understands to be true. Now, in a different environment, the size varies. There's a range, but everybody knows what we mean when we use specific words. And every one of these words has an abbreviation that would appear on a shot list that would be recognizable to any director, cinematographer, assistant director, any camera person. Honestly, even actors like to see, oh, am I being shot in a wide shot or a medium shot? So let's go through these one by one. And I would be curious to know if all of these are the same when you make a movie in Taiwan, and whether you use abbreviations that are essentially the same or different, because I don't know. I've never made a movie in Taiwan. So the first is wide shot. Here's an example of a wide shot from Mad Max Fury Road, which is another excellent movie that I recommend. In a wide shot, the main thing that defines it is that any characters are going to be head to toe. You can see the entire body of any characters that are in screen. That's a wide shot. It's usually used when there's some kind of action that makes us want to see the entire body. An extreme wide shot, which is abbreviated EWS, that's got a different purpose. This is from, I think, one of the Star Wars movies. I actually don't remember, one of the recent Star Wars movies. If anybody knows, you can put it in the chat. An extreme wide shot, this obviously is not about showing us exactly what the actor does, because that character is very, very tiny. We're not going to get a good look at whatever they might be doing. An extreme wide shot is for effect. It's to show scale. In the case of this shot, it's to show how huge this crashed ship is. It might be to show two armies clashing. It might be to establish a location, but establishing isn't part of size. Establishing is part of purpose, and we'll get to that in just a minute. So this is an extreme wide shot, which would be abbreviated EWS. The most common shot in any movie, and certainly in any television, is the medium shot. This you use over and over and over again. The medium shot is roughly from the waist to the top of the head. It could be a little bit tighter and a little bit looser, but generally speaking, a medium shot is half your body, half of the actor's body. And the reason a medium shot is so popular is, first of all, if you're in a room with your friends, this is kind of how you see people a lot of the time. You're not looking at their legs. You're not looking at their shoes, unless you really want to see what kind of shoes they're wearing. You're looking at the top half of their body. You're looking at their face, the expressions on their face, and you're looking at their hand gestures, because that's how we communicate. In a medium shot, you can tell if someone reaches out. You can tell if someone pulls out a gun. You can tell if someone bows. You can tell if someone raises their hands. You're getting really all of the information that you expect to get from another human being, and you feel about as far away from the actor as people tend to be in regular life when they talk to each other. So it's a very familiar view of a human, and that's why the medium shot is so popular in storytelling. But the great thing about film is that we have the power to get closer. We have the power to get closer to each other and to get closer to characters than we tend to in real life. So the next step in is the medium close-up, halfway between a medium shot and a medium and a close-up. This is from Hidden Figures, another excellent movie about women who worked the National Air and Space Administration and helped put humans on the moon for the first time. So this medium close-up, this is more like if we're in an intimate conversation with somebody, if we're sitting next to them in a restaurant, talking directly to them, suddenly we're really just focused on their face, but it still feels fairly natural. Now you get closer still and into this realm, and a close-up could even cut off a little bit of the top of somebody's head and maybe right underneath the base of the neck like this. Now we're closer than we get to regular humans very often, unless we're maybe in a romantic situation, unless you're kissing somebody. And not this guy, preferably. You're usually not this close, right? So when you cut to a close-up in a movie, that's special. That is taking us to some place that is just a little different from the way we interact with people in regular life. This is the power of a movie, to force you to get really close to somebody else. And that makes you feel a certain way, good or bad. This guy, quite intimidating. Then there's extreme close-up. On a human, it might be eyes. On other body parts, it might be hands, an extreme close-up of hands, an extreme close-up of somebody's ear if they're listening to something. Most of these shot sizes, you'll notice, are in reference to human beings, in reference to the characters in the frame. It's a little different when we're talking about shots that do not have anybody in them. It's a little hard to think in terms of a medium shot that doesn't have an actor in it. So it's mostly about characters. Okay, a couple other options. The over the shoulder. This is also a very common shot that you see in a lot of dialogue scenes. This is from Titanic, which I bet you've seen. The over the shoulder shot could be a medium shot. It could be a close up. In this case, it's a medium close up on Leonardo DiCaprio. And what makes it an over the shoulder is that you see part of the other actor out of focus. So what this brings to it that is missing from a regular medium close up shot is we understand how close this character is to the other character. So we know that these two are very close to each other, having a close conversation. It's intimate, it's romantic. If she were not in the frame, we might not be as aware of how close they are to each other. So over the shoulder is very useful for showing us the proximity of the two characters to each other. It also feels very natural. It feels observational. We aren't aware of the camera so much. We kind of feel like we're another person in the room. That's another reason that over the shoulders are optional, are popular. You can also be over the shoulder of anything, and you don't call it over the shoulder anymore. You just call it an over. So in this case, we're over the legs of somebody, and it has a certain comedic effect. But just to be aware that overs can be over other body parts than the shoulder. Okay, so that is all size. Everything that I just described establishes the size of the shot. So the next important thing is the purpose of the shot. And that means, what is the shot designed to do? So these are not all of the possible shots, but there's some really important ones. Establishing, master, reverse, insert, cutaway, and POV. So it's not as easy for me to show you examples from movies of a shot purpose, because purpose is contextual. You have to know how the shot fits into the sequence, into the scene, before you necessarily know what purpose the shot is serving. But I can give you some definitions. So an establishing shot is a shot that shows us where we are. You've probably seen movies or shows where you see the outside of the house, no actors, no characters, and then you cut into a living room. That outside of the house was just meant to establish, here's the house that they're in. Now we're cutting into this room, and here they are. Start with a big farm where you see the farm, you see a whole field of wheat, you see trees in the distance, you see mountains in the distance. Maybe there's people out in the field, but you don't know who any of them are. And then you cut and you're in the barn and somebody's grooming a horse. That first shot was an establishing shot. Master shot. This is really important. Very, very important shot. A master is a shot that contains all of the action in the scene. So your scene might have a wide shot, two medium shots on the actors, and then two close-ups on the actors. Maybe that's what the shots you choose to do to tell this scene. The wide shot, which is referring to size, is also likely your master shot, which refers to the purpose. So a master shot doesn't have to be wide. Master doesn't refer to size, but usually a master shot is going to be wide so that it can contain all of the action. Whenever you go out to make a movie, shoot a particular scene, you want to try to have a master just so that you can always cut back to it. And if something happens on set and you don't finish the shots you meant to get today, you'll still have the master. You can still tell the story. Sometimes there are filmmakers who like to do their entire scene in a master and not do any other shots. And every scene plays out in a single shot. A reverse is simply the opposite of a scene of the shot that comes before it. So going back to this, The reverse shot would be cutting over Leo DiCaprio's shoulder to look at Kate Winslet. That would be the reverse. An insert is a cut very close on something that's important. If I pick up a knife, maybe you would cut to an insert of my hand holding the knife, or maybe you would cut to an insert of my hand reaching for the knife in a quiet, threatening conversation where I'm reaching for a weapon. An insert is you're cutting away from the actors to a close-up of something that's important to the storytelling. Often it's a prop with a hand reaching for the prop. A cutaway, that's something happening outside the master shot, something happening over there. If we're all in a room together and the master shot is covering everything in the room, and then somebody walks in through a door that isn't in the master, you would do a cutaway to that angle as somebody walks in, and then the actor might join the master shot. And then finally, a POV, point of view. That is a shot that is trying to actually feel like it's in the eyes of a character and seeing exactly what they see. It's pretty rare. It's not something you do in every movie because even though it's meant to be inside the head of a character, it tends to remind us that we're in a movie and that this is a camera. So there's a little bit of an artificial feeling to it, which is why a lot of movies never have a point of view shot. But horror movies often do. Character walking down a creepy hallway, you'll cut to a handheld floating shot that is meant to be right through the eyes of the character. That's a point of view. So if you remember anything, it's remembering what a master shot is and that it's not the same as an establishing shot or a wide shot. And I'll make this deck available to you again so you can reference all this later, but I define master, establishing, and wide right here. It's also important to remember an insert and a cutaway. Again, when you're speaking Taiwanese to each other, you might, on a professional set, have different words, but I have a feeling that it's fairly standardized and that these words are what are used one way or another around the world, and that film crews can always understand each other when they're using these names to describe shots. Because one of the most important things that to be able to do on a set is to speak clearly and quickly with a shorthand that everybody understands. Like, okay, let's go to the reverse. And everybody knows it's time to move the camera to the other direction and point at the other actor in the conversation. Or let's save the establishing for the end of the day so we can release the actors, because the establishing shot might not have the actors in it. It might be the least important shot you're getting that day. You could cut the movie without the establishing shot if the sun went down and you couldn't get it. So let's save the establishing for the end of the day. That type of conversation is what you learn your first quarter in a film class at Scad. You learn to talk this way so that when you're on set making a movie, you can keep moving and everybody understands each other clearly. Okay, this might actually be a good time to just pause and see if anybody's got any questions before I move on to camera movement. I closed my screen so I can't see all of you. Emily, can you just let me know if anybody raises a hand?
Sure. If you guys have any questions, feel free to tap in the chat box or open up your audio, your mic.
Okay. So shot size, shot purpose, and movement. So not every shot moves. And when a shot doesn't move, we call it a lockdown shot. That's the camera sitting still on a tripod, not moving. There's also handheld, which is a common way to shoot movies. It gives it a feeling of naturalism and immediacy. A handheld shot could also be static. We wouldn't say lockdown because it's not really locked, but you would call it static. But a lot of times we like to make our coverage more interesting by moving the camera. And these are words that it is really useful for you to learn to use correctly. Whenever a camera moves in or out on a character or a subject, that's a dolly shot. If it moves side to side, that's called trucking or also tracking. You can use them interchangeably. Different, on the East Coast of the United States, they tend to say tracking. On the West Coast of the United States, they tend to say trucking. It doesn't matter. Truck or track means the camera is going sideways. A little more uncommon is the boom shot. That's when the camera moves up or down. You have to be on a special piece of equipment to allow it to do that. A regular dolly might not be able to do that, but there are dollies that can also go up and down. And there's a jib, which is like an arm that lifts up and down. And that's a way that you can boom up. A pan is when the camera is not moving, but it's swiveling left to right. A tilt is when it's swiveling up and down. And then very unusual is a roll if the whole camera is going like this. That's a specialty shot. It does not come up very often. 1 in 100 movies might have a roll shot. You don't really have to remember that one, but I really want you to remember dolly, boom, truck, pan, and tilt so that you can talk about all of those things with accuracy. Now I'm going to tell you the word that people use incorrectly the most. Every film student comes in, when I teach Film 100, they're using this word wrong, and that is zoom. A zoom is not a camera move. The camera does not move in a zoom. Zoom is very often confused with dollying in. People tend to think of it as the camera's getting closer to the actor, we're zooming in. That's not correct. A zoom is a change within the lens. A zoom lens is a very specific kind of lens. If you own a camera, like a professional, like DSLR sort of camera, and you only have one lens, it's probably a zoom. You could turn a dial or sometimes just pull the camera out. The lens physically gets longer and you get closer to the subject, but it's an optical effect. It is not a camera move. So this diagram shows going from a 14 millimeter lens all the way to a 200 millimeters lens on a zoom. And as you can see, we're closer to the buildings as we zoom in. Now, when you do this on your phone, it's not even a real zoom. What it actually is, in most cases, is the camera just cropping in and only looking at a part of the frame and then making that part bigger. So there's actually fewer pixels. So that's not even a real zoom. But on a camera with an external lens, you could have a real zoom. It's an optical effect, but it's different from dollying, and the effect is very different. To illustrate the effect, I want to show you a very famous shot from the movie Jaws. I'll show it to you first, and then I'll explain it. So this shot happens when this character, sees a shark out in the water at a beach that's full of people. He actually sees somebody being killed by a shark. So it's meant to show that he feels really shocked. And if you notice, the character is staying about the same size in the frame until the end, but the background is shifting behind him. Now, the way Steven Spielberg is the director of this movie, the way that shot was achieved is that he did both a dolly shot and a zoom at the same time. He was dollying away from the actor, pulling back, which is why as the shot goes on, you see more and more background visible behind him because the camera is moving farther away. But with the zoom, he was zooming in to keep the character's face the same size. And the effect is that the character's relationship to the background changes. Really interesting, unusual effect. It's called a zolly, Z-O-L-L-Y. And it's kind of a fun, popular shot these days. Definitely a gimmick. You know, you only use it if you really mean it in a certain situation. But it's a dolly and a zoom combined. You don't have to know how to do a zolly. They're actually pretty tricky to do, but you do need to know the difference between a dolly and a zoom. Okay, all of this adds up to coverage. Coverage are the shots that you choose, the angles you choose to cover a scene so that you can tell the story of the scene. And figuring out the language of shots and when it's right to use a close-up and when it's right to use a medium shot, when it's right to use a wide shot, when you want to move the camera, either trucking or dollying. That's the process of learning to tell a story through shots. Putting those together into a scene that feels like we're in the right shot at the right moment emotionally, that's coverage. And of course, editing. Okay, let's see. Were there any questions from any of that?
Yes, there was.
No. Oh, okay.
One in the chat said, comparing a zoom and dolly, which feels more artificial?
That's a great question. It's a little hard to answer. I would say that a zoom feels more artificial, because a dolly, like I can do a dolly shot right now, right? Like that's you physically getting, well, me getting physically closer to you. It's a thing that happens in life, right? We sometimes move toward objects and the environment changes accordingly. Like you see different, you know, this is not a real background, but if it were a real background, everything would kind of, you know, my relationship to the background changes. If you zoomed in on me, which is not something I can imitate here, but basically the edges of the frame I would just get bigger, but everything would stay exactly the same behind me. And that's not how three-dimensional stereoscopic vision works. So that is an optical effect that is quite artificial. So I feel like a zoom in camera feels more artificial. If you watch movies from the 1960s and the 1970s, zoom lenses had, I might be wrong about this, but I think zoom lenses had fairly recently been invented and they became very popular. And so there are a lot of movies from the 60s and the 70s that zoom in on characters' faces, and it feels a little funny. And people do it now when they want their film to feel retro. You know, where you see it a lot is in old martial arts movies, kung fu movies, where there'll be a snap zoom where it's almost like the camera had to reframe to get a close up on somebody. And it can almost be funny now by today's standards. So that's a great question. The other thing that's hard about a zoom, if you're doing it with your hand, turning the knob on the camera or the ring on the lens rather, it's hard to get it smooth. There's actually a piece of equipment you can buy that motorizes the zoom so that you can do a very slow, smooth zoom shot. And that's a good way to do a zoom shot, because that might hide it so that the audience doesn't really even know you're doing one. That's a great question. Are there any other questions?
That was it.
Okay, so when you plan your films, now the next step for all of you from this class to when we meet in person is that you're going to make this movie. You've all written a beat sheet. You're going to go out. You're going to shoot it. You can shoot it on your phone. If you do shoot it on your phone, I recommend that you just go get a little, if you don't have one, a little phone tripod that will allow you, very, very inexpensive, that allows you to put your phone on a tripod so that it can be stable and you can do more controlled shots. You're not shooting it handheld. You're going to go out and make your movie, and we're going to watch some of those movies in our next class. And so I want you to be able to plan your shoot. When you plan a film, you start with the script. That's the blueprint. The very first thing you have to have is the script. In your case, you might even be able to get by with just the beat sheet if it's a detailed beat sheet, and if it's a silent movie with no dialogue, or you can write it out in script form. But that's not super important. We're talking about you're making a 1 to 2 minute short film. The beat sheet may be all you need to get started. The next step, though, is a shot list. So you've got the script, you know what the scenes are, and now you figure out of all these shots, wides, mediums, close-ups, establishing, what shots am I going to do to cover each scene in the movie? You try to figure that out as best you can. You can try to plan it out. Sometimes I set up little action figures on my desk, and I use my phone camera to design shots and see what angles are going to be good using little action figures. You can figure it out however you want. Some people can just close their eyes and see the movie in their head. I'm not one of those people. I need visuals to help me. You're going to make a shot list. You may choose to make a storyboard from the shot list, which is an illustration, and I'm going to show you examples of all of this, an illustration of what those shots look like. Great way to communicate with your crew and even your actors. And the final thing you're going to put together is a schedule. What order am I going to shoot these shots in? Right now, as beginning filmmakers, very hard to make a schedule because you don't have the strategies yet that go into making a day of shooting logical and efficient. Takes a long time to learn that. By the time you're a senior, hopefully you'll be good at scheduling your shoot. But definitely right now you won't be. And in your first year, scheduling is it's complicated. There are certain ways that film productions have learned over the years to do things that are efficient and make sense. So don't worry too much about the schedule, but just be aware that it's important. So the script is the written description of the dialogue and action. The shot list is a list of all the setups that will be used. The storyboard is those setups depicted as drawings, and the schedule is the order of your shoot day. At least know what those things are. So I'm going to show you an example now, and I chose a TV commercial. So I direct a lot of TV commercials. That's how I've made my living for 15 years, in between making occasional feature films. But I've done hundreds of TV commercials, and because they're very, very short, it's easy to demonstrate what each piece of this looks like. I don't have a schedule, but I've got a script, a story, a shot list, a storyboard, and then I'll show you the final commercial. Okay, so this is a script. If you remember Mad Max Fury Road, I showed you an example from that. In fact, let's go back there real quick. Take a look at that car. So Mad Max Fury Road, great movie from, what year was that? 2018, 2019, something like that. So I made a commercial for a chain of gas stations, and the premise of the commercial was that Mad Max comes to the gas station. That's what they wanted to do. So we had to create this car. We had to come up with an actor and a costume that looked like Mad Max, and he was just going to come get gas. So that's the spot. So here's a script. Now you can see this does not look like a movie script. It's because there's no dialogue, and it was written by somebody at an advertising agency who's not a filmmaker. So they just wrote it as description, a little bit of a list of shots, pretty straightforward. And at this point, it's fine with me. You can write your script in any format you want. It does not have to be a perfect movie script. So from that, I made a shot list. And as you can see, the entire commercial was going to be 14 shots. 14 shots is a pretty good day of shooting. If you can get 14 shots that are properly lit, well executed, that's a pretty good day of shooting. If you're shooting on your phone with no lights, maybe you can do 20, 30 shots in a day. That's just something, a 1 to 2 minute film, you might need 20 to 30 shots to tell your story. So just keep that in mind in terms of when you make a shot list. If you feel like it's 50 shots long, maybe you've got too many shots. If it's only 5 shots, maybe you need some coverage. All right, we won't go through all of this, but you can see here, there's a wide shot of the gas station. There's a close-up of Max. This should probably say insert of hand. That's my mistake. It's close-up of the hand, but it's really an insert of the hand. HH refers to handheld. So some of these are on a tripod, some of them are handheld. There's an ECU, that's extreme close-up. And then down here at the end, there's another wide shot. Okay. So then I did a storyboard where I drew each of these. Now I'm actually noticing some mistakes in my own work here. This should probably have been defined as an establishing shot rather than a wide shot. This is only a medium shot because the character stands up out of it, and then by the end of the shot, he's in medium. As drawn right here, it's more like a medium wide shot, not quite a wide shot, because when he stands up, he's not going to be head to toe anymore. But it's a little wider than a medium shot right now. This is an insert of a hand pumping gas. This is a handheld. It's also an over following shot. This is probably a medium close-up right here. This is definitely a close-up. This is another insert. I hope you can see my little, can you see my arrow when I point at things?
Yes.
Yes, okay, good. All right, I wasn't sure. Medium shot, insert, close-up, traditional close-up. Maybe this is almost an extreme close-up, but I would still call this a close-up. This, I would say, is effectively an extreme close-up because all we see is his eyes, the way it's drawn here. And then back to our wide shot or our establishing shot. Okay, let me stop the share for a second so that I can share it with video optimized. And now I'll show you the finished commercial.
Here so you can heli on.
Okay, so you can see that things are more or less the way they were storyboarded. We actually got a few extra shots that were not in the storyboard because we had a little bit of time. So there's a few extra shots that we got. There's a couple of shots that wound up different. For example, in this, we had this idea that he dumps water on his face because he's so hot. We decided to eliminate that because it was going to require a wardrobe change every time he did it. When he was wet, we couldn't do another take. So we took that out and we replaced it with the shot of him slurping a slushie in the car, which means that we actually never did this shot. And we ended instead with something more like this. So to go through it again. Okay, we did a slightly different establishing shot here. This close-up was an extra that was not planned. See how that goes from a wide shot, the camera is actually moving in a bit, dollying in into a medium shot. Actually, that's actually more of a medium close-up, I would say, because we don't see it all the way down to the waist. We only see him from the chest up. So that's actually a medium close-up. That's an insert. That's another insert. You could also describe it as an extreme close-up. Another insert. That's the over-the-shoulder dolly. Well, it's not a dolly shot because it's not on a dolly. It's a handheld follow shot is the way to describe it. If that were on a dolly, moving smoothly, it would be a dolly shot. Medium close-up. And standard close-up, a little wider than what was in the storyboard so that we can see his slushie. Okay, any questions about that? that whole process? Okay. So let's see. Can we, Emily, are we able to go about 90 minutes, or do we have to?
I think we can if you, as long as you have the time for it.
I do. Okay, is that good with everybody? Thumbs up. The reason I ask is that I've got a little 7-minute short film that I could show. Just with when you've got the shots in your head, it could be really beneficial to watch a movie that's got good coverage, so that you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to show the first few minutes of the movie. I won't show the whole thing, but I'll make the link available if you want to watch it on your own. But I think it's good to now look at an example of really nice shot design. So let me open this. Oh, actually, I didn't need to do that because I've already got it open. Okay, share screen. Okay, I'll just play the first couple minutes of this because that'll be enough to get you thinking about shots. So notice we're starting not with an establishing shot, but with close-ups. These would really all be described as insert shots, but it's still establishing a scene. It'll be very obvious where we are just from these close-ups. So far in this film, we've only seen extreme close-up inserts and extreme close-ups of his eyes. Really interesting way to start a movie. That's an establishing shot. Now we know we're in a city and it's sunset.
Simon.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I keep starting and stopping it. But that whole first 40 seconds, nothing but extreme close-ups until there's 2 medium close-ups side by side. And as you'll see, the movie starts to loosen up. So their strategy was to start very tight and then expand to see the world. But you also notice that the shot and the reverse shot, so we had a medium close-up of the main character and then a medium close-up of this character. They match.
Ow.
What's this? An over the shoulder, right? So now those 2 medium close-ups, it's not so easy to tell how far away the characters are. So now we go to this over the shoulder and we understand, okay, they're about 8 feet away from each other probably. And also the boss is framed in a medium shot, so we can see he's carrying this box of files.
Simon, I really have to get home.
Yeah, sorry, pal. Tax department. Pack of dogs they are.
But, Simon... No worries, Simon.
That is a POV shot, because you saw the way the camera moves kind of loosely, connecting to the character specifically looking. So why would this be a POV shot? Because she's going to smile right at him. And now we know she likes him, right? So it's an important story beat. And that's a tricky cut to do into an even tighter shot that shows the psychological position of the actor. Notice she's looking right at the lens. That's how we know that we're in a POV. We're in the eyes of our main character, and we're having this moment with this woman, and it's very clear that she likes him and that he likes her. But that's not her point of view. Notice that his eyes are looking just slightly off camera because you really only go into the point of view of your main character. This one is not designed to be a point of view shot. Some establishing shots to show the passage of time.
Oh,
This is a two shot. That's another way we could describe shots. Singles, two shots, how many people are in it. You could also describe it as a profile shot. So there's more types of shots and more descriptions than I've gone over with you.
Rush.
nothing. Just got.
Big date.
No.
No. Listen, Ralph. I know.
Okay, I'm going to stop there because I think that was pretty much enough to get you thinking about the way shots tell a story emotionally. So wide shot, medium shot, close up, extreme close up, point of view. The way you make these decisions is what is the emotion of the moment? Like what is the character feeling? What do you want the audience to feel? That's how you decide where to put the camera. That, by the way, turns into a werewolf story. And it's a wonderful short film. I'll make sure you have the link to it when I send you all the deck. I really recommend watching the whole thing. It's just 8 minutes long, but it's just fantastic storytelling. Okay. Are there any questions before I jump into going over a few of the beat sheets that you guys turned in? Okay, I don't see any in the chat, so okay. All right, let me bring up the first one. Right, I'll just share my screen again. Okay, this one is called Running Track by Pearl. Let's just make sure she's here, first of all. Can somebody confirm in the chat that Pearl is here?
Yes, she says she is.
Okay. Okay, great. So a nearsighted student who relies on glasses goes for a run on a running track at night. After taking off his glasses, he starts jogging. In the midst of his blurry vision, he suddenly finds himself being chased by a creepy creature. So that's the log line. Very good log line. So here's a beat sheet, written exactly right, I think. A university student with severe nearsightedness goes to an athletic field where many students are exercising at night. He takes off his glasses, puts them down on the bench, puts in earbuds, and begins jogging. He runs for a long time, but slowly notices that he's not circling back to his original starting point. That might be a little hard to shoot and make the audience realize that's happening, but it's still interesting. You just take some planning, and you might want to storyboard that to make sure the audience understands what he notices. He takes off his earbuds, takes a few breaths, and notices that it's unusually quiet. He's the only person on the track. Here's a place where you might want to cut to a wide shot and you realize, oh, there's nobody there. And then you cut back in and he sees a creepy figure rapidly approaching him from a distance. The student quickly rushes back to where his glasses are placed, and just before the creature catches him, he puts them on and turns to look around. And the athletic field has returned to its original lively state as if the eerie event has never occurred. So I think that's a really great little setup for a horror film. I think it's fun, it's interesting. The blurry vision is a great technique for implying a monster without quite being able to see it. A creature is always more frightening when you can't really see it very well. Now, a couple of suggestions. One, I would like to see more happen in this moment where the creature is chasing him, because that's the most exciting part of the movie. And to me, it feels like it's over a little too fast. he just gets his glasses and he's all good. If he has never circled back to the original starting point, he's in some kind of void, maybe he can't find his glasses. So maybe you should make things a little harder for him, and his escape could be a little more thrilling and frightening because he can't find his glasses. Maybe there has to be even some other solution than getting his glasses back. My other note, okay, so right now, this is an effective, scary little story. But when we think about it emotionally, it's only scary. That's the only emotion we have because we don't know this character. We don't know anything about him. So what I'm going to suggest is there a way that he can be a character with a problem? Maybe his girlfriend just broke up with him. Maybe he just broke up with her. Maybe he just committed a crime. Guilt, fear, sadness, desire. If there's something emotionally going on with this character when he decides to go for a run just to work out his emotions, and then the monster attacks him, the whole thing becomes metaphorical, and suddenly we care more about what happens to him, and the story takes on meaning. Right now, it's an effect. It's a random person being chased by a monster, putting on glasses, and everything goes back to normal. It's good. It's really good. But if you can give that character an internal emotional problem that we can relate to, then it becomes much better. So that's my advice for Pearl. Pearl, do you have any questions for me or anything you want to ask me?
No, thank you so much.
Okay. All right. Let's go to Is Judy Lee here with the man trapped on the roof?
Yes, Judy is here.
Okay, great. So the log line here is a man takes a break to smoke, a smoke break at work. He goes up onto the roof. Strong gust of wind happens, closes and locks the door, trapping him on the roof. He tries various ways to escape, and in despair, after giving up on getting the door open, he leans his head against the door and he notices a sensor hidden behind a plant, and he uses his access card to leave the rooftop. Okay, so this is basically the same story as Toast, right? Which I showed in the first class, where man is trying to do something simple, in that case, make toast, in this case, get a door open, and he tries everything till he discovers there was a simple solution. So it's a good structure. He goes onto the roof to smoke, wind blows, shutting the door. He tries to call a colleague to help him, but his phone battery is dead. He tries to wave at people in the next building. Nobody sees him. I like this one. He uses a lighter. This is actually directly from Toast. He uses a lighter to burn a pen cap to open the lock. So in a way, you've kind of traced Toast, but just with a different situation. It's totally okay. He fails until he gives up and then finds the sensor. All right. So I think that this movie and Toast have a little problem, which is that the solution to the problem, the climax of the movie, where the character solves his problem, doesn't come from anything he did before. And it's really something that he could have discovered at the beginning of the movie, which makes it a little bit random chance that he solves the problem when he does. A better story is one that builds and things change for the character, and by the end, the outcome is different because of what came before. So think of the movie I showed, Black Hole. Each thing the character does once he discovers the magic hole builds on the previous thing. And at any point, the outcome could have been different, but it leads inevitably toward him being trapped in a safe because of his greed. So I would consider, like, take this basic story, man trapped on a roof. It's great. Introduce another character. Okay, forget about Toast. Don't model it on Toast anymore. Introduce another character. What if somebody else comes out on that roof? Now there's a lot of possibilities. The other person could close the door, not realizing, or like let go of the door, not realizing it's going to blow shut, and now they're both trapped out there. The other person could have a feud with the man and not want to let him off the roof. The other person could want something from the man, some kind of conflict. Or if they both get locked out of there, some kind of solution that becomes possible because there's two of them that would not have been possible if there was one of them. Like when he calls, here's a moment that I think is a little weak in this script, is he tries to call his colleague, but the phone battery is dead. Okay, that's very convenient for the writer because he's already trapped on a roof. What are the odds his phone is also dead in the middle of a workday? What if instead he calls his friend to come let him in? That friend comes out and the door blows shut. Now they're both trapped. And it's funny and ironic because the person who came to rescue him also gets trapped. Maybe they try to call somebody else and say they're trapped on the roof, but that person wants something, blackmails them to give them something before he'll let them out. You see how if you let them use the phone, maybe there's more possibilities for a more entertaining, interesting story. Okay, Judy, any questions for me based on that feedback?
No, thank you.
Okay. Okay, the next one that I wanted to talk about is Suri Lu, about the flying magic box. Is Suri here?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry. My phone started talking because it sounds like Siri. Okay, the log line is an impoverished man left with only a box from his deceased parents discovers it's a magical flying box, and he embarks on a global journey that transforms his suicidal thoughts into a profound realization that the richness of the world's wonders far surpass material wealth. The protagonist's parents have died, leaving him a box. He crawls into the box to die because he is poor and homeless. When he wakes up, he discovers that the box has lifted him into the sky. He travels around the world and meets different people. Upon arriving in a new place, he recounts the stories of what he witnessed in the previous region. He earns food and money by telling stories. He comes to a new place, meets a girl, falls in love with her. He stays there and tells her stories every day. They get married and live happily ever after. Okay, first, I want to say that I love this story. I think there's something very, very beautiful about this box, and he almost decides to use it as a coffin just to bury himself and die. And instead, it's got this magic that transforms his life. I have no idea how you would shoot this movie, especially in the next 2 weeks. It seems very difficult. It seems more like something that would be written to be an animated film. And I did get a few beat sheets that were definitely animated films because the main character was an animal or something like that. This one could be a live action movie, but I feel like it's got a lot of special effects that would make it, and a lot of locations that would make it difficult to shoot. But I really liked it anyway. So I wanted to give you a little bit of advice on it. And that advice is that what's missing from the story right now is a conflict, an obstacle, a problem. I mean, the boy starts with a problem, which is that he's impoverished and he's orphaned. But as soon as the box lifts him out and he realizes he can fly all over the world, After that, he doesn't have another problem. It's all just good, happy things happening to him after that. I think, first of all, you don't need to, have him get all the way to the point where he's married and lives happily ever after. I think it's enough that he travels the world in the box and becomes a storyteller. But something has to go wrong for him. The box has to stop working, or he crashes the box and it breaks into a million pieces. We have to take away the good thing that happened to him, and then he solves it on his own. I think a great solution would be that he's flying in the box. He's gotten a little too used to it. He's not paying attention. He crashes it and it breaks into a million pieces, and he's devastated. And he tries to put it back together, and he can't. And so what does he do now? Maybe this is the moment that townspeople come up and he starts telling the story of all of his adventures. And maybe that's the first time he realizes that he can be a storyteller. That could be a really beautiful story. And he makes his money and makes a living. People bring him food. People offer him a place to stay because he's telling this amazing story about a box. And possibly it turns out that the box could never fly at all. That all the box gave him was this dream of being able to fly. And that gave him the skills of a storyteller, and that solved his problem. That might make for a really interesting tale. Any questions from Suri?
No, thank you.
You sure? Nothing you want to ask? I feel like there's room for a little bit of discussion.
Yeah, I would think about
I-
it, for myself.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, sure. All right, let's do two more. And again, I have notes for everybody, and I'll provide that at the end. Okay, this is Chiyu Chow, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name. I'm quite sure I am. Winnie, are you here?
Yes.
Okay. So the log line for this one is: a student who is extremely tired and sleepy is sitting in front of her desk in the bedroom studying for an exam. The doll on her desk suddenly falls over. She picks up the doll, but it keeps falling over, and eventually the student herself falls asleep. I think this is a really good story. Now, one thing I want to say is, of the 17 scripts that I got, about half of them were about a student trying not to fall asleep. That tells me that you guys are overworked and that you need to get more sleep. And I sympathize with that. But one thing I want to mention just categorically is that while trying to stay awake is definitely a real problem and a relatable problem, it's not necessarily a very interesting problem, and it's not a very visual problem. So when you come up with a beat sheet, when you come up with a story, when you're faced with making a film, think about yourself as an audience and what you want from a movie. If a character is just trying to stay awake, by definition, the thing they should do is go to sleep. And the struggle is sort of mental and internal, and it's going to be a lot of drooping eyelids and drinking coffee. It's not necessarily very interesting. Audiences like stories about characters who desperately want something, who have a passion. They are in love with somebody. They desperately want to achieve a goal. They are fighting for their lives. They're having an adventure of some kind. That's what we want out of stories. So falling asleep, not a great topic for a story. So I would encourage everybody who wrote a story about a character just trying to stay awake, that you maybe go back and come up with something that is more cinematic and more interesting and would be more exciting to watch. Okay, that said, I did pick one of the sleeping stories because I thought this was the best one. So let's go through the beat sheet. A student is studying late at night. A doll on her desk falls over. She picks up the doll, rubs her eyes, keeps studying. The doll falls down again and again. She picks it up again, bringing it back, trying to do other things to stabilize it and hold it up. She grabs two other objects to try to stabilize the doll and keep it standing up. It falls down in the other direction. She builds a pen tower as scaffolding around the doll. Thought that was very funny. The doll falls down. The pen tower breaks. The student stands up angrily, stomps around, falls down on her bed, and immediately falls asleep. So I think this is a good script because it's very clever. She's trying to get this doll to stand up. She's obsessive about the doll when really what she needs is to fall down herself. And it's almost like the doll has been trying to tell her it's time to go to sleep. And finally, she does that. So I think it's a very effective story. If we get one movie about going to sleep, I think this is the movie. So a quick word, I haven't been spending a lot of time with your mood boards. The purpose of a mood board is to show us what the film might look like. So Donald Duck is not going to be in the movie. It's not going to be an animated movie. So these cartoon visuals, even though I understand that this is sleepy and this is angry, that doesn't quite work. And whatever doll you use when you film this, I think it should be a human doll, a human-looking doll. Maybe even one of those wooden dolls that artists use for posing, for sketching the human form. You know what I'm talking about? They kind of, you can shape them, because then you could even show that doll being in different positions and looking really tired. So I would definitely use a humanoid doll rather than a stuffed dog. But your mood board should reflect what the film is going to look like. You just pull shots from usually movies and TV shows, just do screen grabs, and that'll be a more effective mood board. But I think the story is very strong.
Thank you.
Okay, sure. Do you have any questions?
No.
Okay. And the last one that we'll do today let's see. Oops, I forgot to see the name of the student here. This is the one about a vending machine, but I don't know who I don't know the name of the student. Is that student here?
I think this is from Yolanda and Ken.
Those are the names of the characters in
Oh,
the story.
okay.
It seems like Yolanda is present.
Okay.
That is.
Oh, okay.
Her.
Oh, so that's her real name. That's her name also. Okay, great.
Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about this one. When Ken's impatience with a vending machine leads him to walk away from a delayed reward, he must confront his own hasty decision and recognize the value of patience and honesty after witnessing a classmate, Yolanda, benefiting from what was rightfully his. So it starts with Ken, a high school student, is starving, and he heads to the vending machine before class. He selects it, tries to buy soy milk. The vending machine lights up and beeps, but never dispenses his drink. In a rush and overwhelmed by hunger, he slams his fist against the machine, but nothing happens. He storms off to class, angry and empty-handed, and the machine starts to whir after he turns the corner. Yolanda notices the delayed soy milk finally dropping out. She glances down the corridor, seeing that Ken is gone, and debates for a moment. With a quick look around, Yolanda snatches the soy milk without a second thought. In class, Ken's stomach growls loudly, is distracted by his hunger and frustration. Yolanda enters the classroom, drinking the soy milk, and avoids eye contact with Ken. Ken sees the soy milk with Yolanda, puts 2 and 2 together, and realizes what happens. The end. Okay, so I think it's a good story. There's 2 characters. There's a simple need. There's a simple desire, and there's a conflict between them. I could not tell if Yolanda knows that she's stealing the soy milk from Ken. Now that I read it again, I think maybe she does. She sees him walking away. But when I first read it, I couldn't tell. To me, the more interesting part of the story is what happens next. Because now we've got 2 characters. One stole from the other, but arguably had the right to because the other one had abandoned it. A lot of things could happen now. And I think that would be really interesting. So I would take this a little further. I feel like you've got half the story and the other half of the story is yet to come. I'm going to suggest that maybe instead of soy milk, it's something like chips so that Ken might want to get the other half of them. Like if somebody's drinking soy milk, you're not going to want to drink out of somebody else's soy milk. But if it was chips or crackers or something, you know, dry like that, he could maybe want to, he could share them. There's some other options. So I think there's a lot of ways this could go. Yolanda and Ken could become enemies. They could share. There could be a love interest. There could be some sort of cat and mouse game as Ken tries to distract Yolanda and get her to leave the snack on her desk so that he can steal it back. I think there's a lot that can happen between Yolanda and Ken after this. I think this is you've gotten as far as act 2 of a 3-act structure. Act 1 is Yolanda gets Ken's snack. Act 2, Ken figures it out and wants that snack back. And act 3 is what does Ken do to get his snack back from Yolanda, and what happens? How does it turn out? So that's going to be the most interesting part of the story. And I think you'll have a great little short film that's very visual, very simple, and a perfect one for this class. Okay. Any questions from the writers of this one? Okay. Any questions in general from anybody? All right. So I will leave it there. And the next step, your assignment now, is to go shoot this movie. If you have written a movie that you can't shoot, just write something else. You've seen some examples of some effective short scripts. So I picked, with the exception of The Flying Box, which I picked just because I love it, I tried to pick stories that I think are shootable and the right size for this assignment. So if you didn't write that, if you wrote an animated film, you know, with a main character that's an animal or something like that, you might want to write it. The Magic Flying Box, if you think you can do it, go do it. I would love to see that movie. But I have a feeling that would be kind of tricky to shoot right now with limited resources. Write a movie that fits this scale, and you'll be shooting it in time for our in-person session. And in that class, we are going to watch and discuss all the movies that get turned in. So I'm going to hand it back over to Emily to give you some information about that next workshop. And I'll be there in person, getting to meet all of you face to face.
Thank you so much, Professor. We actually have a student related a question to that. When would the video be due? When would their film to be due?
Emily, what's the date of the in-person workshop?
So our in-person first one is in Taipei on the 18th of November. And the second one is on the 23rd in Taichung.
Okay, and this group here is in both places, right?
Yes, they should have been in both places, but mostly in Taipei.
Okay. So if you're in Taipei, we need to receive those videos on the 17th. But if you're in Taichung, lucky you, you can have till the 21st. So basically we need to receive the videos the day before the workshop.
Sounds good. And I will also post this in the group chat so everybody can have it written down as well.
Okay. And I see somebody in the chat asking, this is more of a question for you guys. He's in Taichung, but he celebrates the Thanksgiving. So do I. I'm skipping Thanksgiving for you guys. And he's wondering if there's anything else he can do. I would say if you want to make this movie and send it, I'll give you feedback remotely, even if you're not able to be in either workshop in person. And Emily, I will send you my comments on all of the other scripts so that you can redistribute it back to the students.
Sounds good. I will do that. I'll do that. So talking about our workshops, I have just sending a couple posters in the chat. First one coming up as our Taipei event info session, like Professor Wagner will be there with us. We'll share about SCAD, and I will also go over your film, and you are also able to meet some of your classmates in person as well. Now, the second one is in Taichung. It's on the November 23rd. If you guys have time to join us, please feel free to scan the QR code and you can register for a spot for the event. And if you haven't, please join our line group where I will share the emails, the due date, and event reminders from next week. So please join us in the group. We'll share more information in there. And for those who have emailed your assignment to us before, like Professor said, I will distribute back the feedback by email to you as well. Professor, we do have a few just submitted the assignment this morning. I will email you and hopefully we can get some feedback as well.
Okay, sure. And, just a word about editing. Most people have had some experience editing videos because you've got Instagram and you need to create videos. If you have never done any editing at all, there's an app, a phone app that I recommend called CapCut, and I assume it's available in Taiwan as well. It possibly, a different name, but it's probably still CapCut. I just put the name in the chat. It's very, very easy to figure out. It's one of the best phone-based editing software. Now, obviously, if you know how to edit and you can edit in Premiere or Final Cut or something like that, of course, do that. Shoot on whatever level you have personally experienced. But if you're making your first film, shooting it on a phone, one really important thing, oh my gosh, I forgot to say this, shoot your film horizontally. Do not shoot your film vertically, horizontal, the shape of movies. So I want to emphasize that to everybody. And Emily, maybe we can put that in the message. Like when we send this deck, I'll add a slide in the deck, but maybe we can reinforce it in the email that you shoot your film horizontally. But if you shoot it on your phone, CapCut is a really intuitive tool. You can figure it out in 10 minutes and it works really, really well. Okay, that's all I've got.
All right, thank you, everyone. If you have questions, we will stay a few minutes. You can feel free to type in the chat box. And don't forget to join us in Taipei and Taichung in the coming weeks. We'll be looking forward to seeing you there.
Bye, everybody.